The chandelier light scattered across the polished marble floors of the Grand Belmont Hall, where the Omnivecta Annual Excellence Gala was already buzzing with movement and champagne. I arrived 10 minutes early, as always, with my blue folder, tucked firmly under my arm, the same one I'd carried into nearly every strategy meeting, proposal pitch, and quarterly review over the last 3 years. Tonight, it held no documents, only silence. At the check-in table, a junior staffer gave me a cursory glance before scrolling down the list of names, her brows pulled together. Name again, Melise Navarro. She looked again, lips pursed. I'm sorry, I don't see you here. That was the first slap. The second came seconds later. Of course, she's not, a voice chimed behind the table. I didn't need to turn. I recognized Delaney Rusk's clipped tone immediately, my direct manager, immaculate as ever in a steel gray gown that probably cost more than my laptop. We're at capacity, she added, barely looking at me. You understand, seating's tight. Behind her, the banquet hall was spacious and glowing. Round tables wrapped in cream linen, crystal glasses, assigned place cards, faces I knew, colleagues I'd mentored, the newer hires, even Brinley Sorrell, the intern with 3 weeks at the company and a sudden reputation for brilliance, was already seated laughing with the VP like she belonged there. She was wearing my algorithm like designer perfume. Delaney crossed her arms. You're not on the list. You can wait outside. For a moment, I stood perfectly still. I could hear the soft clinking of glasses, the low hum of applause from the stage, as someone was called forward. A name that wasn't mine. It never was. Then I opened my clutch, pulled out my phone, and tapped send. I met Delaney's eyes, calm and clear. Check your inbox. The words left my mouth like an anchor dropping through water. A second later, the first notification sound pinged from someone's phone behind her. Then another. Then another. I turned and walked out, leaving the golden light behind me. By the time I stepped into the elevator, I could hear the change in the room, the rising chatter, the scraping of chairs, a single glass shattering somewhere near the center table. The first call came before the elevator reached the lobby. I joined Omnivecta thinking I'd finally found the place where results mattered more than charm. A logistics powerhouse craving innovation, or so they claimed. I had just finished my dual masters in systems design and predictive data logistics. I turned down 2 offers from consulting giants because this company promised something the others didn't: ownership, impact, integrity. My first project saved them nearly $3.8 million in error reductions. The inventory tracking interface I designed was seamless, intuitive, adaptable. It quietly replaced a legacy system in 4 departments. My name didn't appear in the official rollout announcement. I was told it was an oversight. I kept going. Created a predictive model that optimized cross-region shipping. When a high-profile client was on the verge of terminating their contract due to inefficiencies, I pulled 3 all-nighters to patch a bug the product team couldn't trace. No one asked. I simply handed the fix to Delaney, my direct manager. 2 weeks later, she received the Innovation Leadership bonus. Good team effort, she said, passing me in the hallway. No eye contact, I didn't protest. Not the first time, not even the second. I just started saving things, every changelog draft, time-stamped folder message trail. I stopped using company servers for anything beyond what was absolutely required. Everything meaningful lived on my encrypted drive at home. When I finally brought my concerns to HR, Carell Darnell blinked, slowly, barely lifting her fingers from her keyboard. Did you create these during work hours? She asked. Yes. Then they're company property, not personal IP, and if my manager claims them as her own, she's your supervisor. She represents your department. That's the proper chain of recognition. The unwritten rule was clear. Ideas flowed up. Credit didn't. I left Carell's office knowing I was either going to drown quietly or build a raft of my own. For a while, I chose silence. It was the safer option, the expected one. But something started shifting 6 months later on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when a new intern with perfect teeth and a last name that mattered walked through the door, Brinley Sorrell arrived with the scent of pedigree trailing behind her Cornell Honors Program summer internship at a defense contractor niece of board member Wallace Sorrell. She smiled, brightly asked innocent questions, took notes in a leather-bound planner that probably cost more than my first car. She shadowed me during my process. Reviews asked to learn my flow, and insisted she was there to absorb, not interfere. I wanted to believe her. I even left my annotated draft of the new logistics protocol in the shared department drive temporarily for feedback. It had taken me 6 months to refine. It was a complete overhaul, cost-effective, scalable modular for growth, the kind of system that would carry Omnivecta into the next decade if they had the foresight to see it. 3 weeks later, Brinley stood before the executive panel with a clicker in hand and an all-new initiative called Project Spindle. The slide deck was familiar, only the language had changed, my formula renamed, my models rearranged, my methodology reworded in soft pastels and corporate buzzwords, and the board loved it. Delaney clapped the loudest. I wasn't even informed about the presentation. I found out the next day when my calendar pinged with a company-wide email congratulating Brinley on her visionary restructuring of Omnivecta's logistical strategy. Attached was a photo of her holding a Plaque Innovation Excellence Award Q3. My inbox stayed empty. So did my chair at the ceremony. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the flashing cursor on my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even delete the shared folder where my original file had lived, time-stamped, versioned, and abandoned. I opened a new directory on my encrypted drive. I labeled it Project Peregrine. Not a revenge file. Not yet. More like a vault. And over the next few weeks, I began transferring everything they thought they'd taken, every idea, every framework, every refined piece of logic into it. Not because I had a plan, but because I knew one day soon I would. I built Project Peregrine quietly, brick by brick, in the quiet hours after work, when no one could claim my time or touch my files. I coded from my kitchen table, structured simulations on my personal laptop, tested variables during weekends and holidays. I rewrote my original logistics framework into something leaner, faster, and harder to reverse engineer. And I kept everything, every version history, every performance benchmark, every test result logged with obsessive precision. Once the foundation was strong, I began documenting the past, not just my own thefts, but patterns. I compiled presentation slide timestamps, meeting minutes, Slack message threads, versions of files before Delaney's edits. I had receipts for years of erasure, but I wasn't the only one. I reached out to Tamsin Vale, a former product developer I barely knew, outside monthly cross-functional meetings. She'd once confided to me about a predictive routing patent she'd filed that mysteriously never made it past legal until it showed up 6 months later under someone else's name. Her resignation had been quiet. Her bitterness wasn't. Then came Leo Maris, the only client strategist I'd ever seen cry after a quarterly review. He'd spent a year developing a loyalty retention model that salvaged our largest shipping account. His VP presented it to the board, and Leo's name didn't even make it into the internal memo. Each conversation was careful at first, then urgent. We weren't just wronged. We were patterned. And more importantly, we still had our minds, our drive, our blueprints. I didn't need vengeance. I needed a platform. And the people who understood the depth of this rot didn't need convincing. They needed a chance to build something better. So I gave them a name. I told them it's not about fighting Omnivecta. It's about becoming the place we all thought Omnivecta would be. And quietly, between coffee shop meetings and encrypted group chats, a team began to form underneath their radar, outside their control, just out of reach. We were 7 at first, some still buried inside Omnivecta, playing the game with blank expressions and quiet contempt. Others had already walked away and were just waiting for something worth walking toward. We weren't rebels. We were builders with bruises, Tamsin Leo Meredith Reese from operations, Jude Norin from engineering, Sasha Teal from product testing, and Corey Ellen, once one of the sharpest back-end minds on the East Coast, before corporate rot pushed him into early burnout. I asked for nothing at first. Just a conversation, a chance to tell them what I was working on to see if the fire still lived under the dust they'd collected. It did. The plan needed one more piece capital. I reached out to Dallin Iverson, a venture catalyst who'd once spoken on a panel about investing in companies born from betrayal. He remembered me. Not because I stood out, he admitted that, but because of a follow-up email I'd sent after that conference outlining inefficiencies in his firm's logistics partners. I never heard back then. I heard back now. We met at a coffee shop across from the ferry terminal. I showed him the refined framework, the simulations, the retention-ready team. I explained how we were building what Omnivecta refused to become. Dalen leaned back, arms crossed, smiling. "This isn't revenge," he said. "This is revolution." Funding came fast after that. Within 30 days, I had a legal entity under the name Nexus Arc, a commercial lease under a holding company, and the beginnings of a startup carved from the bones of our shared history. We'd filed provisional patents. We locked down external devices. We even began drafting our resignation letters, not just written, but synchronized. I printed mine on heavyweight paper, not out of pettiness, but weight. I wanted them to feel it when it landed on their desks. Still, something was missing. A stage. A spark. We didn't want to disappear quietly. We wanted to leave a mark the same way they erased us in public and without apology. And then the company sent out a calendar invite for the Q3 Excellence Gala. I waited until the second award was announced, long enough for the cameras to be focused on the stage and not the entrance. I wasn't listed, but I showed up anyway. Delaney's face twisted into a polished sneer the moment she spotted me near the door. "You're not on the list," she said with theatrical pity. "You can wait outside." I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I just reached into my clutch, opened my phone, and tapped send. The email was titled, "Transfer of Power Effective Immediately." Attached were 8 resignation letters, time-stamped and signed. A PDF packet containing our provisional patents, notarized and backed by legal counsel. Client migration agreements from 3 major accounts, each prepared, signed and queued for execution. And a final attachment, a press release scheduled to go live at 8 a.m. the next morning, announcing Nexus Arc, an independent logistics firm built by former Omnivecta engineers and strategists. At the bottom of the email was a video clip, a quiet recording of a strategy meeting from last quarter. My voice explaining a solution, Delaney's voice repeating it word for word in the next meeting, Brinley nodding. I closed my clutch and leaned toward Delaney. "Check your inbox." I turned and walked toward the elevator heels, echoing against the marble. Behind me, I heard the first chime. A phone buzzed, then another. A gasp. The sudden scrape of a chair. The hum of curated joy shattered in real time. By the time the elevator reached the ground floor, my phone was lit up. Call from Jay Felder, CEO. Call from V. Soltran, VP Ops. Call from K. Darnell. HR. I silenced the screen without a glance and stepped into the parking garage. It was almost beautiful how fast silence turned into noise. I had spent 3 years watching them ignore me. Now they couldn't look away. As I unlocked my car, the garage doors swung open behind me, and I heard hurried footsteps echoing across the concrete. "Mayalise, wait." The voice echoed off the concrete before the man himself appeared, panting. Hard suit, jacket, unbuttoned tie loosened, Vincent Soltran. Omnivecta's always composed VP of operations looked like he'd just run a marathon through a thunderstorm. I paused with one hand on my car door. He reached me breathless. "You can't walk away like this." I said nothing, just watched him struggle to look composed, with his forehead beading sweat and his words outpacing his breath. "We'll double whatever you've been offered," he said. "Triple if that's what it takes." I tilted my head. Is that what my ideas are worth now? Triple. The silence I've swallowed. His jaw tensed, but he tried to steady his tone. This doesn't have to be messy. We're willing to discuss equity, a new position, title, autonomy, you name it. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This was the same man who once sat across from me in a quarterly review and told me my role was supportive, not strategic. The same man who nodded approvingly when Delaney showcased my work in Brinley's voice. The same man who passed me in the halls without remembering my name. You didn't even think I'd show up tonight, I said, and I wasn't worth a chair at your table. Vincent held up his hands. That was a mistake, a clerical mix-up. No, I replied. It was a pattern. I opened the car door, set my bag on the passenger seat, and turned back to him one last time. I didn't leave because of the pay, Vincent. I left because I stopped needing your table. He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't wait for whatever weak attempt at dignity he had left. I closed the door, started the engine, and eased out of the space as his reflection disappeared in the rearview mirror. Halfway down the exit ramp, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until I saw the caller ID and realized who had decided to call me next. The call came just after midnight. Thurston Dre, board chair. Elusive, powerful, never one to lower himself to the operational messes of the company. If Vincent was the silk glove, Thurston was the iron beneath it. I didn't speak right away. I just answered and let the silence stretch. Ms. Navarro, his voice rasped, precise and slow. I trust you understand the seriousness of what you've initiated. I do. Then let me be clear, he continued. What you've done constitutes a breach of confidentiality. You've jeopardized proprietary frameworks, disrupted client agreements, and depending on how far this goes, may expose yourself to patent disputes and litigation. I tapped the speaker icon and laid the phone on the table where Leo was already sitting. He hit the record button without a word. Everything I've built was created on my own time, on my own devices with my own funding, I said calmly. Your legal team reviewed the original version of the framework 6 months ago and dismissed it as impractical. That was then, he snapped. Now it's costing us. No, now you're realizing what it was actually worth. His voice sharpened. If you persist, we will pursue every avenue available to us. Financially, legally, reputationally. Do you really want to pit your fragile startup against our resources? I let the question hang in the air. Then you should have considered your resources when you let people like Delaney and Vincent turn your innovation pipeline into a popularity contest. Thurston paused. When he spoke again, his tone shifted, still hard but calculated. What would it take to bring you back? I stared at the blinking red light on Leo's recorder. There are no terms, Mr. Dre, I said. This wasn't a move in a negotiation. It was the end of one. He didn't respond. Just a click. Then silence. I turned to Leo, who raised an eyebrow. I nodded. Let's get the rest of the team in early, I said. We have a press release going out in 7 hours. It had been 6 weeks since the gala, 6 weeks since the emails, since the calls, the panic, the threats. In that time, Nexus Arc had launched onboarded 3 major clients and hired 12 more team members. Our office, once an empty industrial space, buzzed with quiet urgency and full hearts. That morning, my assistant knocked on my door. There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. I didn't need the name. I already knew. Vincent Soltran stood in our reception area clutching a leather folder and a face that had aged 10 years in 6 weeks. His hair was neat, but his eyes were tired. He rose as I entered and offered a half smile I didn't return. Thank you for seeing me, he said, following me into the conference room without waiting to be invited. He slid the folder across the table. A formal acquisition offer, substantial equity. Full integration of your tech into Omnivecta's platform. I opened it. The number was higher than I expected. Pages of polished legal terms followed. And then near the back, the real offer, Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to the board. Autonomy guaranteed. I looked up. You're trying to buy back what you discarded. Vincent didn't flinch. "We know we misjudged you. The board believes your leadership could—" "The board believed I wasn't worth a seat," I interrupted. "And now I'm expected to crawl back for a title." "No one's asking you to crawl." "No," I said, "just to forget." He sat back defeated. "You've built something remarkable, Melis, but you could have it all without the fight." I closed the folder gently and stood. "I already have what matters, and we're just getting started." As I opened the door, Leo stepped in, tablet in hand, grinning. "Press just picked up the story," he said. "You'll want to see the headline. 1 year to the day since the awards ceremony that changed everything, I stood backstage at the National Freight and Logistics Summit, waiting to be introduced." The event hall held over 2,000 industry leaders. I'd once dreamed of being in the audience, now I was delivering the keynote. Nexus Arc had grown faster than I could have imagined. 30 employees, 27 clients. Our systems had cut shipping inefficiencies across 4 countries. We were negotiating our first cross-border acquisition. The office that used to echo now pulsed with movement and laughter. Omnivecta, meanwhile, had bled leadership contracts and public confidence. Their stock had dropped 44%. The board ousted Delaney. Vincent resigned. Thurston disappeared from public view. When the announcer said my name, there was a round of polite applause, then a noticeable hush as I stepped up to the podium. I saw them in the crowd. Carell, Brinley, even 2 former board members, all sitting in the second block, eyes fixed on the stage. I adjusted the mic. "You're not on the list." A few heads turned. A ripple of recognition moved across the room. "That's what they told me." I continued, letting the silence settle. "So I built my own list." A few chuckles broke the tension, but I didn't smile yet. I used to think power came from being included, from getting invited, having your work seen, your voice heard. But power doesn't come from being given a seat. It comes from knowing you never needed their table in the first place. Now I smiled. We built a new table. One where ideas are traced, credit is shared, and no one has to wonder if they matter. Scattered applause. Then stronger. I scanned the room and saw not just former colleagues, but former versions of myself. People waiting to be seen, and others finally realizing they never had to wait at all. I ended the talk without flourish, just a quiet conviction in my final line. The most powerful seat isn't the one others save for you. It's the one you build yourself. As I stepped down, I saw Meredith waiting near the stairs, grinning. "They're asking for interviews," she said. "All of them."